there's a lot of bad news coming at us all the time, and the environmental movement is pretty well known for bringing the bringer of that news, the bearer of the news, the communicators of that news. And before I jump in, if you like to tweet, please feel free to do so. That's my name on the bottom, and I do like to stay in touch via email. So I get those emails too about extinction and about threats and about hotter, warmer, more acidic planet, and they actually kind of feel like a kick in the nuts, frankly. It just kind of just nailing you every time. It feels like a poke in the eye and a smack in the face with a cold fish. That's how the environmental movement kind of comes at us. Or like a big bucket of cold water thrown over our heads. And that's part of it. That certainly is part of it. Somebody needs to deliver the bad news, and sometimes that bad news more than hurts. It stings. It aches. It brings us down. It makes us stressed. It makes us even depressed and very sad, especially because if you're really paying attention, it comes in waves, wave after wave, which is why I love Earthwatch so much. And you hear the conversation about Earthwatch being like a family, and it pulls you in. And so rather than a kick in the nuts or a poke in the eye, Earthwatch is a big hug. Really, seriously, isn't it? Isn't it like, you get a message from Earthwatch and it feels like a big hug? You come to an Earthwatch conference and it pulls you in, it envelops you. It says, join the family. Come, let's have a look around. Let's see what's going on. Let's learn together. Let's spend time in nature. Bring your kids. Spend a week, spend 2 weeks, spend a day, spend a weekend. Let's figure out what to do. Let's work together. Let's collaborate. And that hug keeps growing. This organization keeps reaching further, expanding its arms, bringing more people, more volunteers, more companies, more governments, more ideas into the family. Like Elmo, right? I think. That's Elmo, by the way, in case you didn't know. Yes, you know Elmo. It's good to know that Elmo is still, a celebrity. So we gave you a marble on the way in, and that marble is kind of like a blue hug. It's a token of gratitude. It's meant to remind you of this blue marble, the one we live on. And if you hang on to it, put it someplace safe, it will remind you of that whenever you come across it. But your homework is to pass it on to someone that you want to say thank you to. And I'm going to speak a bit about our relationship with the watery parts of our planet, which turn out to be the majority, that hold the majority of life and the majority of diversity, biodiversity, the majority of the habitat. And I want to also have that blue marble be kind of a reminder of some new ways of thinking about our planet and its water. So if I ask you, what's your water? You may say, the river outside. You may say, that's my water. That's the water that I wake up to. That's the water that I recreate on. That's the water where I go to think. Or it may be something a little more simple, a bucket of water that you use to bathe. Perhaps your water involves spending time with wild animals and observing them, watching them interact with each other, and being moved by that, being more connected to them and to yourself. If your water involves a boat and going out to sea, you've probably met these folks. They like to come and hang out as long as they decide to and bow ride. Nothing better than being on the bow on the water when dolphins show up and hang out. And these are all experiences that Earthwatch PIs and volunteers and staff have, I think, daily, right? Isn't that the way it works at Earthwatch? You go out and go dolphin watching every day. Right? One of the perks. And this, Brian Scary's photograph, a much more immersive experience, but really nothing better than being fully immersed in nature and having those one-on-one, very personal experiences. When we're out there having a look around together, It brings us together. It creates bonds between us. Spending time in the field with an Earthwatch team, you will make friends that will be your friends for life. You will. That's just the way it happens. You're in a circumstance that lends itself to that, to person-to-person bonding, to deeper relationships. And what is it about nature that facilitates that? What is it about water that takes us there? Well, it sometimes involves the built environment. And this is a famous pier in the UK that burned down this year. A beloved location, people of many generations for many, many years have gone. And their memories are made there. And they will rebuild that pier because it represents that time spent together by the water. For some people, their water may be a little more urbanized, a little less wild, perhaps a rooftop pool like this one in Singapore that I've actually never been swimming in, but I like the photograph. Quite spectacular spot, really. And for some people, maybe their connection to water is much more domestic, like Jack Black, who his water is the water in his bathtub, and he likes to hang out with his puppy and eat eggs and enjoy the cool or warm water, as the case may be. Sometimes it's just a drink of water, waiting online as a school kid and waiting for that taste of water when you get to the water fountain. On a warm day in a park, leaning over, pressing the button, just having a sip of that water. But we can appreciate water, whether it's in a glass, coming out of a fountain, it's urban water, it's a river running through our city, or the wide, giant Pacific Ocean. When I think about my water, I think about my dad and the time we've spent together by the water. And one of my earliest memories, it's a bit fuzzy because I was just 2, but this photograph and others have carried that memory forward. And I feel like I remember spending time in the Bahamas in this beautiful blue water with my father. And I look forward to hopefully doing that again as his health improves. As a kid, we were very fortunate to spend time in nature and bond with nature and ourselves. And when I see this photo, it reminds me of the way the grass felt, the way that lake felt. It was very cold. Even in the summertime, there was some ice around, and you could slide down the ice into the water, and that was considered a bath. I remember the way the trout that we caught tasted, and I remember the sound of the wolves howling at night, and how that tent wall seemed really thin. But at that age, I actually was not so much a mountain boy. I was more of a coast kid, and I love turtles, but I don't have a picture of myself with turtles, so I have to substitute this. If you squint your eyes, it kind of looks like me a little bit, doesn't it? Actually, I didn't have shorts like that. I used to love catching turtles in the Chesapeake Bay and painting numbers on their shells. I kind of became obsessed with turtles, and I started to see them everywhere, and it became clear that I was headed in a different direction than maybe my parents had in mind. And I remember the day coming home and standing in front of my dad and telling him that I wasn't going to be a doctor, I was not going to be a lawyer, I was not going to be a businessman. And so the fourth possibility might be engineer, maybe. I wasn't going to be an engineer either. I was going to be a turtle man. And I remember his utter confusion about what he may have done wrong, what he thought might have gone off track that would have lead his son to want to be a turtle guy. And people ask me, what's your connection to Earthwatch? And I say, Earthwatch saved me. Because when my dad asked me what I was going to do with a PhD in turtles, I had one clear answer, which was everything. I'm going to do everything. And he said, okay, I don't know what that means. And I didn't really either. But the world around us, our advisors, the foundations, thought the population of sea turtle that I set out to study with my colleague Jeff Seminoff, they thought it was too late. They weren't interested in funding the work. And we applied to Earthwatch. And Earthwatch said, we'll give you a try. You seem passionate and like you have have it somewhat together. Your field site's beautiful. Let's give this a shot. And they did. And that was the beginning of what has led to a fascinating research program and a successful conservation program that has been very much community-based from the beginning, with Earthwatch involvement as well as with the local community's involvement. And one of the first things we did is we put a satellite transmitter on a loggerhead sea turtle named Adelita, and we let her go into the ocean. And she had spent 10 years in captivity. And when you watch this video, you see her swim a short distance, which is about the diameter of her tank, and then pause, as if to say, where's the wall? Shouldn't there be a wall here? So in her small turtle brain, she imagines there, a wall. No wall, just the Pacific. I'll keep going. At least that's what it looks like to me. And when I watch that, I think, what are your walls? What are my walls that are imagined, that are invisible, that aren't really there, that we create in our minds, that become tall and wide and thick, and that we can't get over or around them, that aren't really there? So for Adelita, it was an imagined wall of a tank. And then she started swimming. And lo and behold, she swam home. And for her, home was Japan. She swam from Mexico to Japan. It took her 368 days, 12,000 kilometers, no walls, just wide open blue space. And she swam and swam and swam. And this was 1996, and we had this data coming in, and a colleague in the computer science department said, why don't you build a website and put it online? I'll help you. And of course I said, what's a website? And he told me what a website was, and I said, oh, that sounds good. And so we shared the data online. Our colleagues said, put up another wall. They said, people will steal your data if you put it online like that. They'll steal it. And I thought, whoa, wow, yikes. Stolen data, don't want that, do I? And then I stepped back and thought about it. I thought, what would someone do with stolen turtle data? I could only think of good things that you could do with stolen turtle data, like A, help save sea turtles, B, help us understand it, C, help kids learn math using turtle data, D, help kids learn art and poetry using that data. And that's what happened. And it was fantastic. We created what later became Facebook. It was called Turtle Book. And it was an online social media platform that connected turtle geeks around the world who had the same kinds of feelings. But really, as we tracked the turtle online, people from all over the world found it because it was one of the coolest things going on. And that's citizen science. That's the spirit. The people who helped us put the transmitter on the turtle were fishermen and their kids. The people who helped us analyze the data were fellow scientists we'd never met and kids. And the people who helped us communicate the results far and wide were everybody, because we put it online, because we shared. So to close off the turtle segment, and there's a lot more I could say about turtles. If you settled in, we could talk about turtles for the next week solid. As long as people would bring us food and water, we could do that, and I would enjoy it immensely. But suffice it to say, because of Earthwatch's initial support, because of the support that followed, we've been able to work really hard and build a team. Lots of hugs, lots of coffee, lots of work, lots of thinking, lots of camaraderie. And we built a team that has successfully brought the black sea turtle back from the edge of extinction. This year is having its best year since the early 60s. So the population is no longer declining. It's no longer bouncing along on the bottom of the barrel. It's on its way up. And that I can attribute to Earthwatch saving the project. So I remember going and talking to my advisors about how this was working and talking about the people, the volunteers, the fishermen, so on and so forth, the fellow scientists, the network that we were building. And their response was, let's push off of that a little bit and let it go. And I thought, no, let's dig in. Let's understand that better. Let's understand what it means to pull together and hold hands and work together. Let's understand the science of that. As scientists, what does that mean? What does it mean to look inside and understand ourselves and our relationship to nature and to dig deeper into the human brain? And now we can do that. Now, the brain used to be viewed as a black box. You could stimulate it and look at the response, but you couldn't really see what was going inside. Well, you could. You could look at a brain after somebody was done with it and see what was going on. But there's something not so handy about that. We want to look at brains while they're being used to better understand them. So now we have the technology to do that. EEGs, fMRIs. We can ask questions about the brain in motion, the brain at rest, the brain working hard, the brain under stress. We know that oxytocin is a neurochemical that's important for a lot of things, including building trust, including hugs. Kind of cool. So we at Earthwatch are in the oxytocin business, frankly. Get your oxytocin at earthwatch.org. We can understand love through a different lens. We can talk about love as scientists. And sometimes my wife doesn't think that's so romantic to talk about the neuroscience of love. I find it quite sexy, frankly, but that's one of the things we differ on. Neuroscientists are studying just about everything: stress, meditation, bacon. Your brain on bacon. There's a whole department here at Harvard that studies your brain on bacon. Did you know that? Just kidding. Nobel Prize in Medicine was won by neuroscientists who study sort of our internal neurological GPS system. Absolutely fascinating. The cover of Scientific American magazine this month is on the neuroscience of meditation. Notice the brain is glowing blue. Now, if you look around the literature, you find neuroscience and a lot of topics, and each of those is represented by one of those big dots. What you don't find is neuroscience and nature well represented. You find just about everything else, but not nature, not the ocean, not the rivers, not the lakes. Why is that? That big sort of maroonish dot to the lower left, that is the research on your brain on bacon, frankly. I'm just kidding, seriously, the bacon thing is not going over well. So we are now able to look inside our brains, we're able to poke around, we're able to ask a whole different set of questions. And I think those questions must and will involve our relationship to the wild world, our relationship to nature, our relationship to wild waters, our relationship to wildlife, our relationships to each other as we have those experiences. Right? We have the technology, and we should not just apply it to marketing. We should not just apply it to bacon. We should not just apply it to understanding neuroeconomics. We should also apply it to our understanding of our relationship to the world around us. And I hope you agree with that. This generation is the first one to have a decent user's guide to the brain. Think about that. What does that mean? It's huge, hugely important. So what are we going to do? Why are we going to do it? And how are we going to do it? Those are the questions. And I'm going to leave those mostly as questions. I'm not going to answer them in the interest of time. But when we talk about our oceans and their value and our waterways and their values, we often refer to jobs, food, energy, oxygen, hydration, of course, and biodiversity, among other ecosystem services. And when we talk about the value of an Earthwatch team, we often talk about funding, getting more data, interns, access to new networks, and new ideas and skills. All very important as well. So none of these are optional. These are all very important. But what we're missing in our conversations about trophic cascades and ecology and ecosystem services are the neurologic cascades and the emotional services. So after we restore the predators that fix the prey, that balance the plant community, that changes the river and makes it healthier, then what? Catch and release fishers show up. They bring their kids. They all fall in love with the river and themselves. They go home, they join an organization. They go home and found an organization. They go home, they become scientists. That's what we're talking about. That's what Earthwatch leads on. Earthwatch sits on a legacy of building the neurologic cascade and the emotional services that are derived from time in nature. And that's a really exciting way to understand an organization and a movement. The psychological, social, emotional, and cognitive values of healthy nature, healthy waterways. I call the whole endeavor neuroconservation. There is no department of neuroconservation yet. The students who are interested in studying this mashup of neuroscience and biodiversity conservation are going to be the heads of the future departments that focus on this. So we now know that nature is in fact medicine without side effects, mostly free, but we need to take care of it for it to work. It'll lower our heart rate, make us feel better, pull us together. And in this crazy busy world with lots of stress, increasingly so, increasingly connected, we experience monkey mind. We experience something that psychologists and Zen masters call monkey mind. And we would love to go to that doctor and have it pulled out. That red mind experience, the opposite of blue mind, where we're anxious and stressed out. That's part of life. It's normal to have those thoughts and feelings, but we need to balance it out with blue mind. So Oliver Sacks, who is one of the most famous neurologists, talks and writes about spending time in the water. And it's where he gets his best ideas. It's where he feels free and he thinks at a very high level. He keeps a notebook on the dock or at the side of the pool so he can write down notes that then become wonderful books that many of us have enjoyed. He's a water guy. Research into this field is beginning to expand. And if you're interested in digging into the primary literature, look up Matt White's work at University of Exeter Medical School. So we've known this to be true through art, through the masters who have painted water, painted our emotional connection to water. People like John Imber in more recent times. People like Ran Ortner, who paints the sea. People like Pablo Neruda. Necesito del mar porque me enseña. I need the sea because it teaches me. E. Cummings. Even Maya Angelou. We've known about this emotional connection, but we've kept it out of our serious conversations. We've left it in the books of poetry and hanging on the walls. It's a question of access. Giving people access to their blue mind. That's one of Earthwatch's roles. Getting people to nature. Building awe. Awe, the science of awe. What a fascinating thing to do a PhD on. That feeling of awe that we get in nature switches us from a me orientation to a we orientation. Brings out your inner Elmo. Brings out creativity. Solitude. And solitude is incredibly important for proper cognitive development. Here's a research paper that just came out a couple months ago that showed that young people left alone have a really, really hard time with it. They would prefer delivering an electrical shock to themselves than sitting quietly alone with their own thoughts. Think about that. Brings us relaxation, quiet, and wonder, nostalgia, and compassion. Awe generates compassion. And at the base of it, that experience builds trust. It builds trust in the scientific process. It builds trust in the environmental movement. It builds trust between people. And that's what we need. And you can't get that from an app. You can't get that from Justin Bieber. Sorry, Justin Bieber fans. You can't get it from Angry Birds or an iPhone. you get it from this, spending time together. And at the base of it, of course, is love. And I stand here as an Earthwatch scientist and an Earthwatch cheerleader saying, the base of this organization is, in fact, simply love. Love of each other, love of this work, love of the legacy and the history of this organization, and above all, love of nature. So thank you for listening and letting me ramble on a little bit about our brains on nature. I hope your blue marble travels far and wide and serves you well, and that you have a great afternoon. So thanks a lot.